I grew up in the rural Piedmont, North Carolina, in Rockingham County, a little place called Wentworth, and went to grades 1 through 12 at small high school, Wentworth High School. Went to NC State University from 1970 to 74 and have a degree in wildlife biology from NC State. And then I went to Louisiana and got a master's degree at Louisiana State University in wildlife management. Went to Louisiana in 1974 and was there for 2 years, from 74 to 76. Worked on clapper rails. My thesis was on did research in the marshes in southern Louisiana on the Gulf Coast islands.
Very good.
So at NC State, I was kind of at the tail end of Fred Barkelow's career. So Dr. Barkelow and Dr. Tom Quay were two of the older professors there at NC State that I learned a lot from. And also I was lucky when I was there, I was able to get a job with the Cooperative Fisheries Unit. And Mel Hewish was the manager of the unit, and his assistant was Garland Pardue. And so in the summers and on breaks, I was able to work with a number of students who were working on master's or PhD projects there. I worked with David Whitehurst and let me think. David was doing fisheries research. He was the main one. Roland, somebody we worked down at Oak Island and in the Cape Fear River. And Bill Tarpley was another student that I worked with there, doing fisheries research in northeastern North Carolina, in Hertford, Bertie, and Gates counties. Probably working on the actual research project for my master's degree was the most useful, because it led me into a lot of different directions, and it was something that you'd be looking at one question or trying to answer one question, and you would end up finding other things that were interesting, and just kind of catching a lead and following it. And so I think that was pretty neat, and fortunately I was able to kind of follow through on that through a lot of my career. It just so happened that things that were interesting to me were things that the state allowed me to work on. The types of things that I really liked to do when I was a kid: play in the creek and catching salamanders and crayfish, and trapping rabbits in rabbit boxes was another thing that I really enjoyed, and then hunting. So I started off squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting, and my dad was a quail hunter, and so we quail hunted a lot when I was really young. But as quail became scarce and deer became common, we kind of evolved over to deer hunting. By the time I was in college, my dad had pretty much quit quail hunting because there weren't any left where we lived, and I was spending my time deer hunting, squirrel hunted, duck hunted a lot in Louisiana. So the hunting and fishing aspect of it's definitely what got me started in wildlife. So one event in particular I remember, we went on a deer hunt at Butner, and so they had a check station there, and so they were collecting data off of the deer that were harvested. So that was real interesting to me, and kind of let me know there was a career out there working with wildlife. Before that, I think that I realized that that people actually had jobs working with wildlife. But I was pretty young then too. I was probably 13 or 14 when we made that hunt. And that kind of made me decide, and I kind of stuck with it from then on. The first job was summer jobs and weekend jobs when I was a student at NC State. So 2 years working with the co-op unit there. Anytime that I wasn't taking classes, I was working with the co-op unit. Got paid a little bit, had an assistantship when I was in Louisiana at LSU. Finished up college, came back home. I was married, we had a kid, and got a job as a temporary worker on New Hope Game Land, working for Sam Wiseman. He was the wildlife technician at New Hope, and did a little bit of everything there. We did some deer surveys, and we did plantings and boundary line work, and we trapped some wood ducks. Worked only a few months there, probably 3 or 4 months there, and then I got a job as a district wildlife biologist. And at that time, the district wildlife biologists, each of the 9 districts was split in half. So I had 4 counties that I worked: Richmond, Montgomery, Moore, and Anson counties. And I also supervised activities on Sandhills Game Land. So did that and enjoyed that a whole lot. Then the commission reorganized, and so went from 4 counties to 10 counties. But the counties that I got were Mecklenburg, Rowan, Cabarrus, and counties with a lot of people in it. So it changed over to, a lot of the work was wildlife damage type work and wildlife problem type work that came on when with that reorganization. And I didn't like that quite as good as I did the actual hands-on management type work. But survived that for a few years, and then I got to be the small game project leader, and then went on from there to be the ag liaison biologist for the commission. So working private lands programs for the commission. The ag liaison job was basically looking for ways to integrate wildlife management considerations into programs that maybe already existed. So coordinating with the North Carolina Forest Service, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, Co-op Extension, and then one other aspect of that job is we had a more focused quail management program called the CURE program, in which we had some monies, actually commission monies, that we could use as incentives in targeted areas to try to looking at the landscape approach at managing wildlife instead of the scattergun approach where we tried to do everything everywhere. We tried to focus in and work on some focus areas and get landowners to do management so that they would be more connected. When I started working, the wildlife profession was about hunting, fishing, trapping, and managing populations of animals for consumptive purposes. And so we didn't talk about non-game wildlife or biodiversity much at all when I first started. And so today, of course, all that's changed, and I went to a meeting of local Division of Wildlife Management folks here. They had a number of presentations, and all the presentations were on herps, non-game birds, plants. Nobody ever mentioned anything about any of the consumptive species. So that, you know, this big change. Not necessarily a bad change, but a big change. Try to do as big a diversity of things as possible would be my advice to somebody coming into wildlife. Take advantage of all the opportunities that you can get. Whether you get paid or not, it'll pay off in the long run. If you know, if you get an opportunity to help somebody do something, no matter how different it is from what you're doing, but if it's got to do with wildlife, do it. You'll learn something, and it'll come back and help you in the long run. And get to know as many people as you can too. So trying to network is always helpful. Well, I'm a fire nut, so the use of fire, you know, you can do a lot of things with fire. So fire would have to be the one tool that, or the management tool that's most useful. So that would be the tool. So thin and burn. So you hear the saying that we're learning more and more about less and less. So you know, that's one potential problem that the profession has, is that we're able to break things apart in tiny little pieces, and oftentimes we don't step back and look at the big picture. But you know, technology is a good thing, and so if I were young, you know, I'd say get in there and figure out how to use that GPS and GIS and to use all those tools. But it's tough. The older you get, the tougher it gets. Because we started out with manual typewriters. So I've been from manual typewriters, or either writing your reports in longhand, up to using computers and email, and so big change during the career. So working with NC State University, starting way before CURE, all the way through the 90s up until the end of my career, we did a number of projects. And so we'd do a project, we'd take the results of that project, and we'd try to apply it in some way, so that we could use what we learned in one project to design the next project. So that was undoubtedly so we studied quail, looking at field borders, looking at pesticides, and then took what we learned about field borders and pesticides and bobwhite quail and put it in practice on a bigger area to see what happened. Well, with my particular job as small game project leader, it would probably be working with bobwhite quail. It's the most pressing issue, and I think we know all that we need to know to manage quail. It's just a problem of implementing it on a big enough area and in such a way that we can make it work, so that the economics of quail management is what makes it so difficult, because people want to grow lots of trees, people want to grow high yielding crops, and all the things that we do to make farming and forestry more efficient, they're bad for bobwhite quail. Well, it was tough working with quail, because you know, the most quail we had was when I started to work, and the longer I worked, the less quail we had. So you know, that was tough, and lots of people had theories or ideas or thoughts that they knew what was wrong with quail, and trying to maintain an objective perspective, I guess, and and to keep people from grasping at straws or looking for silver bullets was really hard. You know, everybody wants to kill the predators or wants to plant food plots, or you know, and there's really no one silver bullet that's going to turn everything around. You know, it was probably when we were working with NC State and learning things about quail in the real world would be the high point of my career. The low point would be when they started stocking pen-raised quail on the field trial grounds at Sandhills Game Land. So that was disappointing. Not sure I know of a dangerous or frightening. Probably had something to do with boats. Maybe in the mouth of the Cape Fear River, going over the big swells, headed out to look at those dredge islands for a shorebird nest. That's pretty scary. I'm pretty sure I know what the most important contribution, and it wasn't just me, it was there's a lot of people, but introducing new wildlifers to the profession is the most important thing that happened during my career. And we were particularly fortunate when we were working with NC State. We had a lot of research technicians that came through, maybe only worked 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, but those people are all over the country now, and you see their names, and you know that maybe had a little bit to do with their success or their working with the profession. So, so working with young wildlifers was the most important thing that happened. People who are important, probably the most important in developing the profession, are the teachers, wildlife professors, because they're getting kids when they're at a very influential age and teaching them the skills that they need and giving them the passion that they need. So I think that would be it. A great wildlife manager got to be a good communicator, got to be willing to take some risks, and has to be able to think outside the box. You know, you got those three qualities in a person, and it's hard to get those three qualities in a person, but got to be able to communicate, talk to other wildlifers, talk to the public. You got to not be scared to try some things that are new or novel, and you got to be able to network. You got to be able to think outside the box. Need to become a wildlife professional today because it's probably more important than it's ever been, because we need people out there, particularly communicators today, with all the different things that take people's time. Kids and adults alike are getting further and further away from the natural world, and so we need people today that can inspire people to get closer to the natural world. Being in the Wildlife Society, the big thing that it did was networking, communicating with other people that were working on similar problems, or problems that may not be that similar, but you could learn things from and work together to help you map out your trajectory. So the communications part of it is what really helps. Well, here again, we're got less land to work on all the time, it seems like, so it's going to be more important to be effective at managing land and conserving land. Now it's more critical than ever. There's been a general trend. There's more and more property today that's owned by people who have it not just as a money-making thing, but want to have property to enjoy. So there's some opportunities today that we didn't have in the past because everything was so geared into the economics. But rural land in particular, there are a lot of people that have property today that have as one of their major objectives recreation or aesthetics or relaxation. And so those are people that we can connect with now that in the past we may not have had the opportunity. No matter how small the acreage, you know, you can do things on it that are going to benefit wildlife, but you're limited because some species need landscapes and they're not very effective at moving from patch to patch. But there are going to be critters that can move from patch to patch and take advantage of good management wherever it occurs. Well, we'll have to say that I've enjoyed working as much after I retired as I enjoyed working while I was working. So, you know, I've been able to do a lot of fun things and to concentrate on stuff that I like since I retired, and I've had a really good time managing property and helping landowners manage property and burning and growing wildflowers and native grasses. And so I guess my advice would be don't retire, just keep doing what you do, figure out a way to keep doing what you love.